As China celebrates the 90th anniversary of the founding of the People's Liberation Army, we'll be looking at how its military is changing to meet the challenges of the 21st century. And we will also be taking a close look at some of the new weapons that made their public debut this last weekend at a special military parade in northern China. Welcome to The Point. I'm Zhou Yue, sitting in for Liu Xin. To celebrate the 90th founding anniversary of the People's Liberation Army, Chinese President Xi Jinping addressed a gathering in the Great Hall of the People on Monday. He said the Chinese People's Liberation Army is moving rapidly towards strong informationalized armed forces. And in recent years, China has been implementing large-scale military reforms aimed at adjusting China's military capabilities to meet emerging geopolitical challenges. By the end of this year, China is expected to cut its military by 300,000 personnel. Are there any circumstances in which China could resort to war to address geopolitical challenges? For more discussions on that, I'm pleased to be joined from Moscow by Vyacheslav Matuzov, an independent political analyst and former Russian diplomat. And from Hong Kong, we have Andrew Leon, Asian Affairs Specialist. Let me start with you, Andrew. President Xi said that the Chinese People's Liberation Army, the PLA, is moving rapidly toward becoming a strong armed forces, informationalized, and actually the PLA has transformed from very primitive, they call millet plus rifle single service force, to a full-fledged services, and now has completed its mechanization. How strong do you think China's military force is now?
Well, of course, compared with, say, about 20 or 30 years ago, the PLA has indeed made very impressive strides in terms of modern weaponry, more integrated army, and then developing capabilities in key critical areas like anti-access and aerial denial, and also cyber warfare, informatized warfare, and making the PLA a much more flexible military force. But on the other hand, military power is relative. Even though it has improved greatly, and compared with the dominance of, say, the United States, or even for that matter, Russia in some areas, it is still a far cry to say that the PLA, in fact, achieved a degree of superiority over its main rivals, the United States and perhaps the Russia. If you look at it, for example, in terms of the China has recently developed its Blue Navy, so this is a major breakthrough. The Navy is venturing out into the ocean, but of course, China has got only one aircraft carrier strike group compared with 11 aircraft strike groups of the United States. If you look at the number of atomic bombs, for example, it pales in comparison with the numbers possessed by the United States and even Russia. So I think that China still has a long way to go. But on the other hand, compared with, say, 2 decades ago, China's progress has been truly impressive.
And Mr. Matuzov, what is your take on the strengths of China's military, especially the strides it has made and the progress it has covered?
Well, I think that 21st century that we entered 17 years ago, we watched big changes in the world, in different regions of the world. It is in Europe, Yugoslavia, in Arab world, in Korea, and we can notice one very remarkable thing, that the United States is trying to prove its domination, militarily, politically, and economically. I think that all these changes that we watched last 2 decades proved us the necessity to set to make our armies more stronger and more better equipped with modern weaponry, because now we watch very clearly that without using a strong military basis, it is very difficult to feel ourselves in the safe situation, that we cannot feel ourselves far from the danger of interference. Russia faced this in Ukraine, in Middle East, in many other places, and inside Russia, because modern methods, modern ways of war included also terroristic attacks in our different regions.
Let's come back to China's military strength and also strategy. Today marks the 90th anniversary of China's military, the PLA, and China's president said China will never compromise on its sovereignty and security interests. Let's take a listen to this.
China is a peace-loving country, and Chinese people would never allow anyone, any organization, or any political force to separate any part of China's territories from the country. China will not swallow the bitter pill if anyone does anything that jeopardizes the country's territorial sovereignty, safety, and interests.
So, Andrew, what is your reading of his address? Can you imagine the circumstances in which China could resort to warfare to address security challenges?
Well, I think that these remarks are address the very critical challenges China faces over the Taiwan Strait, for example. Of course, that touches on China's sovereignty. And as you know, that Taiwan has elected a new president. She is much less amenable to embracing the kind of the so-called 92 consensus. And of course, the Taiwanese people, most of them do not buy the idea of a unified nation, and they want to maintain the status quo. So I think that this is a challenge. The other major challenge in the region is, of course, China's territorial sovereignty in the South China Sea. That extends the island dispute with Japan, the kind of territorial disputes with a number of neighboring countries, and then the presence, a very heavy presence of the U.S. Navy in the Asia Pacific. And don't forget, the Asia Pacific also is China's bloodline, carrying the trade, the import of materials, which underpins China's economy. So I think that all these challenges have got to be faced and are reflected by Xi Jinping's remarks about resistance and to threats to China's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
But with increased military capabilities, do you think it is harder or easier for China to resort to military means to resolve those differences? You also forget one land border dispute with India, which is being in the spotlight recently.
Well, very good question, because I think that China's strength is not modern warfare. It does not equate to equal forces on either side, and I'm talking about asymmetric warfare. And sometimes with if you have the ability to counter certain coercion in certain key areas, then you'll be able to defend yourself. For example, although the United States has 11 aircraft carrier strike groups and could, in theory, dominate the Asia Pacific, but in the key interest to China, the core interest, the Taiwan Strait, China has now, in recent years, developed the capabilities to deny access, the so-called anti-access area denial capabilities in form of precision mid-range missiles, high-precision missiles that are mobile and that can hit expensive targets like the aircraft carrier, so-called aircraft carrier killers. And of course, China is now also advancing quite rapidly in sort of anti-satellite technology. Disabling the satellite communication could disable the adversaries' military capabilities. So these are asymmetric capabilities which are very, very important in modern warfare.
Mr. Matsov, can you imagine a scenario that China can use its capabilities, as Mr. Leong mentioned, either in the sea or on the internet or through satellite technologies to combat its opponents in any way?
Well, of course, today's army is organized on a very high technological level. And technological developments, successes are very on high standard, can be used in military purposes. I think that the war today, as we watched it in Syria, for example, we remark that great importance is paid to technological developed advanced weaponry. That is rockets, it is aircrafts, it is marine forces. So I think that now all our last events proved us necessity to pay attention to defenses, because political diplomacy, political purposes, diplomacy cannot be had good background if it is not supported and it's based on good military opportunities. I think that military opportunities now America is overwhelming all other nations in the world. But if now we watch common joint maneuvers, Russian, Chinese, and other countries, Shanghai organizations, that means that these new organizations can be the answer of all challenges that we are meeting in the world policy. Because world is now not one pole. It is many poles. And I think that in this new world that we are watching, Russia and China can play a leading role in world policy, in world economics.
A multipolar world, and with the rise of all the strength of the rest, besides the United States. Thank you very much. We're running out of time. We have to move on. Thank you, Mr. Matsov in Moscow, and also Mr. Leong in Hong Kong. And now watching The Point. We'll be right back. For the first time since 1949, and to mark the 90th anniversary of the PLA, Beijing has commemorated its Army Day with a military parade in the battlefield. But the parade at a remote military training base in Inner Mongolia was notable in that almost half of the 600 pieces of hardware on show has never been shown in public before. To take a close-up look at some of the newest and domestically built military hardware, I'm joined from Moscow by Pavel Fagin, a Russian military analyst, and Wang Guixiang, a leading PLA expert in modernization and power projection here in Beijing. Before we start, let's take a look at this. So, gentlemen, this is a military parade to mark the 90th anniversary of the PLA. I was there just a week ago, and the PLA told me those are the state-of-the-art technologies they use. More than 100 planes and almost 600 pieces of weaponry on display, some of them for the very first time. What impressed you the most? Which gear impressed you the most? Pavel?
Well, there was so much there actually new, and what was really impressive is the ongoing, very massive transformation of the PLA from being a regional military power with very limited nuclear deterrence capability into a first-class military world superpower. China is already an economic superpower. Now it's moving into a position of its military, the PLA, equivalent in its capabilities to its economic prowess.
And Mr. Wang, which particular equipment or gears that you are thinking that stand out?
For me, it would be J-20 fighters and also a Y-20 transporter, because they are the force multipliers of the Chinese PLA Air Force.
So you are paying close attention to the Air Force then?
Yes, especially Y-20 transporter, because we can later on develop ACWS aircraft, also the new tanker based on Y-20.
Let's talk about the fighter jets, the J-20, because it's the newest generation of stealth fighter jet, which some say could rival an American F-22 or F-35. How good is China's new stealth fighter J-20? They say it is 4.5 generation jetters. Wang, Mr. Wang?
J-20 has the same RCS level as F-22. Of course, it's 20 years later, but J-20 have a larger fuselage and also further operational radius of action than F-22, which means J-20 can carry larger missiles, and also J-20 later on will be operation as a very key platform in the tactic network, which can direct WZ system, which is unmanned vehicle, also the Lijian system. That makes J-20 very, very special, even better than F-22, let's say, somehow.
Pavel, what do you think of the capabilities of China's own J-20 fighter jets? Of course, China also wants to buy Sukhoi 35 from Russia.
The G20 basically is still a prototype to a large extent. It's clear that China can make modern airframes, G20, G31, actually the G16, though that's the 4th generation, but still it's a good airframe. But still the Chinese industry have problems producing a reliable engine of high capacity, and apparently Chinese best fighters still use Russian engines. And there could be also some problems with modern radar capability. So China is in the process of developing. If the American F-22, that's an accomplished plane. It's not in production already for a long time. It's a flying plane. These are still planes that are being developed. And what will be their capability in the end right now is still yet a bit of an open question.
So, Mr. Wang, you want to respond to that, because China is still in the stage of developing its new generation fighter jets, and also it seems that we are still developing their own gears to equip it with the engines.
I do agree that it will take, let's say, at least one more year for us to get to the IOC phase for J-20.
And how long do you think it will have its full capacity in place, because you need a whole fleet of new generation of fighters to have real capabilities?
We need at least 4 regiments, let's say 48 J-20, to have IOC, which means at least, let's say, 2 years.
Recently, a Democratic senator from the U.S., Joe Manchin, he has accused China of copying some of the designs of U.S. fighter jets. He said J-20 twin-engine stealth fighter is similar to F-22 Raptor made by Lockheed Martin, and J-31 two-engine fighter jets resembles F-35. So the similarity on the ulterior doesn't mean China is copying designs from other countries, Mr. Wang?
I think it's very ridiculous that if you have a basic knowledge about the concept design, if you are comparing F-22 with J-20, it's totally different, let's say, operational demand, and also totally different aerodynamic design, which means it is impossible for China to steal, let's say, the technology of F-22. But for the radar system, let's say AESA system, the technology and also the concept is same for every country. And also there's certain rumors said that China obtained the technology of the steel material somehow, let's say 10 years ago, of F-117. Well, that probably would be possible, but the whole design, the whole demand from Chinese Air Force is totally different from F-22. F-22 have a really shorter operational radius of action, which is not reaching the demand and need of PLA Air Force.
And Pavel, what is your reading of China's weapon technology development level? Because there are accusations that China has been taking technologies from outside for its own weapons development programs.
Well, actually taking technologies and kind of back engineering, it's a normal process. It's been there for centuries, and it requires actually a lot of capability. To reverse engineer a modern fighter, you need to have a very, very well developed scientific R&D and industrial base. I mean, the Soviet Union was also quite often back engineering things made in the West, though actually it happened also the other way around. So it's a kind of two-way street. It's human progress, so there's nothing bad about that. You have to, but you just simply to make a very modern thing and reverse engineer it, you have to have an ingenious capability just to begin with.
I want to talk a little bit about missiles. Among the missiles making public appearances this time is Dongfeng DF-21D, anti-ship ballistic missile. Some people call it carrier killer because it might strike carrier strike groups. That obviously is aimed at USSs in the Asia Pacific. It is in line with the aerial denial strategy of the China's military. Mr. Wang, do you think Dongfeng 21 can basically kill a carrier in the open sea?
Well, it highly depends on the C4 ISR system of PLA, because if you want to hit the target with ASBM, first you need to have a very, very decent reconnaissance and civilian system which is fully functional. For China, it highly depends on the naval reconnaissance system, the air reconnaissance system, as well as the satellite reconnaissance system, which is formed by Gaofen system, Jianbing system, and also Yaogan system.
All these are Chinese own technology, reconnaissance technology.
Sure, and so even until now, that there's no evidence that this system can function 24/7. And also during all the exercises of the joint exercises between U.S. and Japan and naval forces, they were having this kind of joint naval exercises outside the range, the hitting range of ASBM. That means that sometimes uncertainty itself is also a deterrence.
I also want to talk about China's own ICBM, the Dongfeng 31AG. It is an intercontinental ballistic missile. Some say it is an upgraded version than the previous ones. How advanced and capable is this new version, and will it add to the deterrent capability of China's strategic military strike? Mr. Wang?
For DF-31AG, that A means nuclear and G means proved style. And for DF-31AG, it means that it carries the missile with a new TEL system, which means higher capability, higher reliability, and reduce the life cost, which means a very important issue for the operators, because they need something which is really reliable. And also for China to develop a new type of DF-31A means that China need to have this very reliable deterrence towards a strong potential enemy.
Pavel, I want your reading on China's military build-up. Of course, the West sees it its own way. China's neighbors sees it in its own way. How does Russia see China's military build-up and more capabilities in both strategic deterrence and technical capabilities?
Well, Russia and China have been very at loggerheads as strategic enemies in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Since then, of course, the situation has changed very much. But the reading Russian generals who are in charge of the Russian general staff are military people who began their service in the 80s and who have traditionally treated, then at least were taught to treat China as a very important enemy. Now we're, of course, friends, but there is still an apprehension that things could change maybe in the future. Though right now, with China's kind of outreach of the Chinese military to making numbers smaller and building a blue sea navy and everything, that means that China is looking in the other direction, not at Russia, and that's most likely news that's very welcome in Moscow.
Thank you very much, Pavel. That's Pavel Fagin from Moscow, and thank you, Mr. Wang Guoxiang here in Beijing. And that's it for this edition of The Point. As always, you can follow us on Twitter and visit our Facebook page using the handle @ThePointWithLX and download the application CGTN Live. I'm Joe in Beijing. Goodbye.